Welcome beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy. Like countless others, Reiki found me when I wasn't even looking, and then it ignited a whole new world of questions. This podcast explores topics of interest for the spiritually curious. Join me for discussions and special guests on subjects such as past lives, crystal healing, spiritual awakening, ascension, energy healing, and more, all to assist and inspire you along your unique soul's journey. Hi, it's Andrea. If you've ever felt a nudge to learn Reiki with me, this might be our moment. I'm coming over to the UK this June, and I'll be teaching a Reiki 1 and 2 class, and then a Reiki master class will be at the beautiful French Partridge Hotel near Northampton. I'm also including for my students a special exclusive event, and we'll share some time together outside of class, and I think that you'll like it very much. I also know that the world feels uncertain right now, and it may be easy to hesitate and put this sort of thing off. But this is exactly when we need to invest in ourselves and take action, because how we grow now will shape how we'll support ourselves and others later. This is no time to sit on the sideline. Spots are limited, and both the classes are now at least halfway full. Go to mainstreamreiki.com to reserve your seat, to learn more about both classes and that exclusive bonus event. I truly hope to see you in June. Hello and welcome. I'm Andrea Kennedy, your host here beyond the Reiki Gateway. And today I'm welcoming back to the show Simon Bown, and he's a leading voice in the exploration of consciousness, the afterlife, and the paranormal. As the host of the chart-topping podcasts, Our Paranormal Afterlife and the Alien UFO podcast, he's produced over 800 episodes and reached millions of listeners around the world. A clinical hypnotherapist specializing in past life regression, Simon spent years studying extraordinary phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality. He's got a brand new book out, and it's called Verified Near-Death Experiences, Proof of an Afterlife. And it presents 30 astonishing cases where near-death experiencers report verifiable details they could not have known, offering some of the most compelling evidence yet that consciousness continues beyond physical death. Simon, I'm really excited to have you back on the show and talk about your new book and see where the conversation really does take us, because you have so much experience with different areas that we're interested in. So welcome back to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I really want to talk about the book because I think it's a little bit different than a lot of the material out there about near death experiences. And the reason I say that is there's that verifiable piece to it. And so, could you talk a little bit about what that means? Because we see different interviews, we hear different stories, but what sets the stories that you've written about apart?
Each chapter is a different person, and I describe their whole near-death experience, not just the verifiable events. But what it is that every single one of them has something that happens that's verified later, that this thing happened while they were unconscious, while they were dead. Maybe they were in a coma, and it may be something that happened in another part of the hospital, or maybe miles away from their body. And it's that thing where people would hear what they say and say, yeah, that is correct. That really happened. But there's no way you could have seen that because you were dead at the time, or you were receiving CPR and the doctors were working on you. You couldn't have seen the conversation I was having with your aunt in the waiting room of the hospital, because that's another part of the hospital. And there's almost some timing in there. There's a case where a man who had a heart attack, and the doctors, nurses are working on him to bring him back to life. And in the room next door to where his bed is, the nurse is on the phone, and they know that she was making that phone call while the CPR was happening, and yet he was able to accurately recount what the phone conversation was about. And it's that thing. That's the verified thing. They verified that conversation while he was dead. How could he have seen it? And he said, I was in the room. I watched what was happening. I heard the whole thing. So every case in the book, and there's a total of 30, has some kind of verified event like that. And that's an aspect that I find particularly interesting with near-death experiences. And doing my podcast, where it's maybe 350 episodes now, where I've done an hour-long interview, and lots of the people on the podcast are near-death experiences or research near-death experiences. And I read as many of their books as I can. Every time a guest has a book, I try and read it. And I use that to get my questions together for the interviews. So amongst all of that, I've only found one other book that focuses on the verified events. And that was published 2007. And I kind of thought, now's the time for another one. So it's taken me some time to get it together, a couple of years, but I've finally done it.
Yeah, I have to imagine there's a lot of research that goes into that. Um, and probably did you have to whittle down to 30 when it was all said and done? Did you find a lot of cases, or was it hard to come up with 30 verifiable ones?
No, it's quite easy. And there was some I found, some quite old ones, like from 1911 and that kind of age, over 100 years ago. But also, most of the people in the book have been a guest on my podcast. So I've been able to talk to them and quiz them about these verification events. And then when I was writing the book, I did more Zoom calls with them all to go over it again to make sure I got it right. And when the book was nearly finished, I sent them their chapter and they went through it and then got back to me if there's anything wrong with it, any errors, so I could correct it. So the people themselves that are featured in the book, they work with me in a way to make sure that the chapters are completely accurate with the verification events. And so having all these people that I've talked to on the podcast, it wasn't difficult at all for me to find these. But I did want to find more cases to kind of widen it out a bit. That's why there's 5 in there that are quite short, but they're from maybe 100 years ago. And there's one fascinating one that came from the Journal of Near-Death Studies. And they gave me permission to put that in the book because it's such a strong case. But no, it wasn't difficult to find them. I think there's a lot out there. And one thing I find a little maybe peculiar is that when I interview near-death experiencers, they're very much talking about how it changed them and when they go through the life review and their spiritual experiences. I mean, if I ask, was there any verification events? They're like, oh yeah, and it's almost like that's the last thing they're going to tell you. But in a way, it's the first thing that I'm interested in. So yeah, there's a lot of it going on.
That is fascinating, right? Because I guess they totally believe it. So to them, verifying it, isn't like maybe the top of the list for that reason. It's unquestioned to them. It's as real as anything. But I wanted to ask a little bit of a rewind question because you have all of these episodes. You've done past life regression work. You have done so much in the field, as I mentioned. How did you get started in all of that? Because when did you first venture into the paranormal and these topics? Were you always interested in it, or did something happen in your life to open the door?
I was always interested in it. Even at 10 years old, I'd go to the local public library and take out books. In those days, I'd read anything. It could be about Bigfoot and ghosts, and it was UFOs and afterlife and things. And then as I got older, it kind of narrowed down to these 2 areas of the afterlife and UFOs. And it was in the 1980s, I would go to the College of Psychic Studies in London that was set up by the Society for Psychical Research. And I wasn't a student there, but they had people who were students there learning how to do mediumship and be psychic and channeling, past life regression. And you could go and pay a little bit of money and the students could practice on you. So I would go there maybe every couple of weeks and sit with all these different people with all these different skills. And it was a thing of doing an investigation. It wasn't like I was trying to get contact with a deceased loved one and get evidence that they're still alive. And so I was taken through a past life regression in about 1987, which was really powerful. And it was something that I did it again, and I did it again, and I did it so many times, and I was reading so many books that I decided I wanted to do it as well. So I got a diploma in clinical hypnotherapy before I went on to study past life regression therapy. So I got a really good grounding in hypnosis and hypnotherapy. But all this time, though, I've been having my own experiences with little paranormal things and UFO sightings and stuff that happens when I'm with a medium. And so it's like it's a spiritual path, isn't it? And you're taking these steps, and it's almost like the universe wants you to take another step, so they give you a paranormal experience or something that happens. And I wonder if it was all planned from the beginning that I would end up in this position of being a podcaster and writing a book, and that my job is to spread information. So yeah, it's been a lifelong thing now, and I'm 59, and I do feel I've learned so much, particularly with doing the podcast. But it gets you to a point where you realize this is so complicated. And even though I've learned so much, there's still so much more to learn. So it's been great. It's been a real education doing this.
Yeah, I can't even imagine, but I totally get the point of what you're saying. It's like the more you learn, the more questions you have. There's always more out there. And so, yeah, I appreciate knowing your background. It seems really organic, this growth and this path for you. And yeah, I really appreciate that. So with this book, why did you decide to put this together? What are you hoping the reader gets out of experiencing what you've shared in the book?
Part of it is that I'm the point of my podcast, Our Paranormal Afterlife, is to look for verification that consciousness continues after death. It's not religious, and I don't really have any reference to religion in it. It's all almost somebody says, "Oh, I've got proof of an afterlife," and I'm like, "Okay, what's your evidence? Go on, then prove it." And so that's why I've talked to so many people with mediums and near-death experiences, people that study shared death experiences, deathbed visions, and just a whole different set of people, and they're all different pieces of a puzzle: mediumship, children with past life memories, near-death experiences, and you bring them together and you start to see a picture emerging of evidence that there is an afterlife. And also with the podcast, I get emails from people saying that maybe they've lost someone recently and they didn't know anything about this stuff, and they were looking for information and they found the podcast, and to find this information is really good, reassuring in a way. And they might have terrible grief, and it helps relieve that, because it's almost like giving them proof that their loved one is still around in some way and hasn't just been annihilated, which is that kind of
Mm.
materialist viewpoint that you're dead, that's the end of it. And there's some people, I've had a small number of emails from people who really worry about death. It keeps them awake at night, and it's almost a thing where they're saying it to me, like they're saying, I wouldn't ever tell anybody how I feel about this, but your podcast has helped me so much, and I can sleep at night because I found this information. So the book has all those different kind of areas of trying to help people, trying to get this information out there to more people, so they can see that we're more than just physical bodies, and that there's consciousness there, and that continues when our body dies. I kind of see it like the brain is a radio and consciousness is a radio station. So when the radio breaks down and doesn't work anymore, it doesn't mean the radio station stops transmitting. And it's just a fascination for me. Like I said, I'm so old now, but still I'm fascinated, and still I want to know about
You are not old at 59. I just have to go on record to say that. Absolutely not. Um, wow. So, what past life in the book. So there are 30. And I would love it if you would share one of those stories with us, just to illustrate an example of what you've shared there. And then we can delve into some of these deeper topics, I think.
Well, one of my favourites is Tibor Putnoki, and he's a Hungarian man, and he had his near-death experience in the early 90s in a Hungarian hospital, and this was just after, like, 2 or 3 years after they'd left the Soviet Union, and so the hospitals weren't that great. And he went in with really high blood pressure, and the doctors told him that they were really worried about him and they didn't know if he'd survive this. And so he had this terrible chest pains. And then the next thing he knows, he's standing up in the ward and he feels great. And he's thinking, oh, this is good. I'm cured. I feel marvelous. And the nurses and the doctor were rushing past him. And he looked round and they'd all round this bed and they're doing CPR on this body. And he's kind of thinking, wow, this guy must be a VIP. Look how much attention he's getting. And he's looking to the side, and there's this nurse's preparatory room off the ward, and there's a two-way mirror there, so they can see into the ward, but you can't see in. And he wondered what was going on in that room, and then in an instant, he was in that room. And there was a nurse there, and she had a trolley, and she was taking all these things out of a cabinet and putting them on the trolley so she could take them out into the ward. And she dropped one, and it rolled under the cabinet. And he thought, I wonder what that is. And then somehow he was right up at, like, it was 4 inches away from this thing that was under the cabinet. And he read what it was and what the serial number was on this thing. And it's weird that, because I've got another case in my book where somebody's looks at something and they think, wonder what that is. And then instantly they're 4 inches away from it. But this is where the nurse is having a conversation in the room. And she's on the phone and she's talking to her husband about how to find the pediatrician's number in their phone book because their two children are quite ill. They got the flu. And the husband can't find the number in their phone book because it's their own one. They write all the numbers down, and Tybalt's listening to them. They're having quite an argument. And he thinks about the husband, and then instantly he's with the husband. And this apartment is 7 kilometers from the hospital, and they know that the phone call happened while he was receiving CPR. So how could he know what the content of this phone call was? But also he was able to look around the apartment and see the books on the shelves and what their furniture was like, what the carpet was like. And he noticed that the man was wearing these socks with little animal pictures on them. And Tybalt said, what kind of a man wears socks like this? So other things happen to him, which I describe in the book, where he has a meeting with a spiritual being and he has a life review, and these kind of near-death experience things describe all of that. But he comes back to the hospital and he realizes it's his body in the bed that they're trying to resuscitate. And the nurse comes past him with all this stuff to help with the resuscitation. And he tries to stand in her way. I said, no, leave me. I'm fine, like where I am. But they resuscitate him, and after he's stabilized, the doctor comes to him and says, you were dead for 9 minutes. What happened? Did you experience anything? And so he described everything, what happened, and the doctor went and found this item underneath the cabinet in the nurse's room, and he pulled it out, and it was exactly what Tybalt said it was, and he even got the serial number correct that was on the back of the package. And then they found the nurse that was on the phone, and they confirmed the phone call and what the conversation was. And then the doctor went to the nurse's apartment with her. She confirmed she didn't know Tybor. He'd never been to the apartment. And the doctor saw the apartment was exactly as he described it. And when the doctor came back to the hospital, he had those socks in his hand. And so in that story there, that what happened to Tybor, there's several verification events that stand out, and that's kind of typical of what the book's like. And it's all of them have got these verification events. And if there are skeptics, they might say, well, if somebody was in an operating theatre and they say they saw the resuscitation from the ceiling, the skeptics might say, well, they had some form of consciousness and they hallucinated what happened. But if you're in a hospital bed and you can accurately describe an apartment that's 7 kilometers away, it doesn't matter how much consciousness you've got, you're still not going to be able to do that.
That's just so remarkable for so many reasons. The memory of the serial number, I mean, how many of us could do that with our human brain? Look at something like that briefly and actually even just remember that, in our day to day lives. But he's undergoing this incredible experience, and he looks at that and retains all of that perfectly to be able to read it back or recite it back to the doctor. But the 7 kilometers, there's so much to this story. I'm so glad that you shared it. You mentioned too that he didn't realize that that was him until he did all of those other things, right?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
had to go to the bed and look over the nurse's shoulder to see who it was, what was going on.
That is really incredible. And I think that there's some significance there because I wonder how it would have played out had he known that was him right from the start. You know, I wonder, would he have gone to the apartment and everything else? But what does that tell us about consciousness and our perceived limitations that we have?
Well, I think first of all, with the serial number, what I hear from near-death experiencers is when they're out of body, it's almost like they're free of the physical brain, and the physical brain really slows down your intellect. And once you're free of it, you can think so much faster. And they talk about how the whole knowledge of the universe is just right there for them. And if they want to communicate with somebody or another spirit, it's telepathic. And the answer will come before they've even asked the question. It's like everything's so much faster. And so to memorize a serial number, it doesn't seem to be that difficult. It's like us as a soul, so much more than what we are as a human. So we're capable of so much more. And it just seems to me that what this one story shows, like all the others, is that consciousness is not a product of the physical brain. It's something else from somewhere else, and it's almost like that's all I know. I can't really describe exactly what it is, but from a reincarnation point of view, you have the soul, and they say that it's not that the soul reincarnates 100% life after life. It's each life is a spark. The soul puts a little percentage of itself in each body, and so it's like you connected to this tremendous soul that you're a part of, and all your other lives are a part of, and that you can connect with all those others, and it's almost like you all work together to be into. It's hard to say. It's like you're a network or a web, and all of your brains work together in a, a connected whole to work through problems or work out anything.
It's literally mind-blowing, isn't it, to think about all of that? And he was dead for 9 minutes, you had said, right? So when he came back, how how was it for him when he came back? I mean, he was in physical distress before, the event and then dead for 9 minutes. So what happened after he came back?
Well, he wasn't great. There's a number of people in the book who have terrible things happen to them, and they have remarkable recoveries. Doctors
Mm.
say it's miraculous. But he was okay when he came out of it. He was kind of back to normal, but the blood pressure issue wasn't so bad. And so
Mm.
he could go back to his life.
And what about the miracles? Can you give us an example of one of the stories that you highlight about when they return, how things are dramatically different for them?
Well, one of them that stands out to me is Vincent Tolman, who um, he accidentally overdosed on a supplement that him and his friend were taking, they were going to the gym and they were working on their muscles and they were taking this protein supplement. And they always used stuff made in the USA, but this time they ordered something from the internet and it came from Thailand and all the label was in Thai. And so they just did what they normally did, which was put a scoop of it in the water and mix it up and drink it. But it turns out that it was 100% of this stuff. But when you're in American supplements, you only get 5% of this chemical and everything you need. So they had far too much of it and they overdosed. He went to a burger bar and he went to use the bathroom, and it was this just a single room and didn't have a load of stalls in it, and he locked it and collapsed in there. And it was about 45 minutes before they got in there and found him. He'd been dead 45 minutes. And they said it was almost as well that the rigor mortis had started setting in and parts of his body were stiff. And he came out of it like normal. And it's that kind of miraculous thing. They say if your brain is starved of oxygen for just a small amount of time, you start to have problems with it. But he's back to normal now. And it was a thing that happened in the ambulance where he was sitting on the side and his body's in front of him in a body bag. And this young EMT got a message that was a kind of spiritual instruction that Vincent heard it and the EMT heard it. And later we find out it was one of Vincent's guides that told him, this one's not dead. And so he started using the defibrillator on the body. And so that's quite miraculous. 45 minutes after he died, and they could bring him back, and he's back to normal. And there was another woman there who had 2 strokes. One of them was huge, and the other one happened much later, and they managed to control that. But her doctor said that he's never seen anything like it. The recovery she's had and the healing she's had. And she's got a tennis ball sized part of her brain at the front that no longer functions, and a small side at the side of her brain. And I talked to her on Zoom. You'd never have guessed she'd had a stroke. She was just talking normally. And, it's like the doctors say, we can't explain it. It's such a massive piece of damage to the brain right here. And yet she's functioning normally.
Yeah, it's so hard to in a logical way understand that. And you mentioned a spirit guide with Vincent. I really love that story because part of the story too is his friend, and was also in the restaurant and things like that. And there's so much to that story. I really, really appreciate that you brought it up. But what happened to Vincent when he was dead all that time? Can you fill us in a little bit?
It's funny. It's something I hear often. People, they come out of their bodies in the hospital and they can look around, they can see through walls and they can see what's going on. But with Vincent, he raised up over the burger restaurant and he could look down on it as though there was no roof and he could see all the rooms. And he felt he was watching a movie and he could hear everybody's thoughts. And he thought, this is weird. Why has the director put all this conversation on the soundtrack? You can't make it all out because it's so much stuff going on. And eventually he went into this spiritual space and he came across this old man who had a long white beard and long white hair. And Vincent said to him, "Are you God?" And the guy goes, "No, I'm not God." He laughed. He goes, "Are you Jesus?" And the guy laughed again. He goes, "No, you just call me Drake. I'm here to guide you." And they went on, and Drake took him to all sorts of places. And I think there was this thing where he was learning different stages of knowledge. And when he really learnt this piece of knowledge, so he totally understood it, this would raise him a level spiritually. And he was getting raised up as Drake was teaching him these things. And Drake took him through so much stuff. But the verification here is that it was a few months after he was out of hospital and he went to the town where he grew up, where his grandmother was. And he went to the town hall and they showed this film, the history of this town. And then all of a sudden on the screen is this guy that he met during his near-death experience. And he's thinking, what? The guy's name wasn't Drake, it was something else, but his surname was the same as his grandmother's maiden name. So he went to her and said, "Who's this guy? You know, like George Carver. I think his name was something like that." And she's just said straight away, "Oh, you mean Grandpa Drake?" So,
Oh,
she confirmed the name that was given to him during the near-death experience. There was his picture on the screen, exactly. And that, Vincent had never seen this picture before, didn't know the name Drake. So that was another little verification for him that was really powerful.
yeah, that's incredible. And then he when he came back, he didn't have any after effects of being dead that long?
No, I don't think so. I did ask him about it. That's one of the things with me, though. I'm interested in the verification and that kind of thing. I won't talk to somebody very long about that. I might just say, "Did you have a miraculous recovery?" And they say, "Yeah." And then I'll move on to the next question.
Right, right. Well, I'm so interested in that piece because, we grow up and just kind of in our world hear things like you mentioned, like, you can only be out of oxygen for so long. And, from that science perspective, we've been taught these things. But then to hear these accounts, they just don't make sense. And, a lot of our audience is into healing and energy medicine and things like that. And it makes me wonder, after hearing accounts like this, what does it mean for healing? What does it mean? What could we really be capable of here, even in human form? What could we be capable of healing if this is possible? For the physical body to be dead for 45 minutes and come back, number one, come back at all in with any kind of function and all of that. But then to walk and talk and be, healthy enough to live the life, live a life. I don't know. It's just mind bending to me. And if that's possible through near death experience, is there a way that we could tap into that? Is there a way that we could learn from that in order to affect healing in our lifetimes in a new way? That's the kind of thing I'm curious about. Do you have any thoughts about it?
Talking to near-death experiences, there's one guy, David Ditchfield, in his near-death experience, he found himself lying back on this big marble kind of table, and there were two guides, one either side of him, and they were moving their hands over his body, not touching it, just a few inches away. And that they said that was his healing, how they were healing him in the spirit world. And then I talked to a woman called Natalie Sudman, who was badly hurt. She was a civilian working with the army in Iraq, and a bomb went off next to their vehicle, and that's how come she had a near-death experience. And when she came back from there with these two spirit guides, they were looking at her body, and she said, "We were kind of messing around. It was like, well, how are we gonna? How is the body going to be after this when I go back into it? Should we give it chronic illness? No. And the leg's really badly damaged. Let's just fix that, so that won't be something terrible." And she said they were kind of goofing off and having fun with it. And look, how should we do this? How should we do that? And then also there's Anita Morjani. I don't know if you know her, but
Yes.
she had such cancer. She was in the last few days of her life, and she had a near-death experience, and she came back and she was cured, and the cancer was gone. And that was really miraculous because it had really gotten into her. I think it wasn't just in one organ, it had
Mhm.
spread everywhere. And it does seem like they talk about some kind of thing to do with energy. And
Yeah.
that's what I hear. They talk about an energy matrix or a web of energy and how they manipulate that.
Right. And I've read that book, Dying to Be Me, where she gives that account. And I saw similarities between her story and the ones that you share in your book, too, about the instant thought, instantly being with another person and hearing their thoughts and their conversation and all of that. So it was really neat reading through your book and having that memory of her story, which I read so many years ago. So it was really coming full circle. But the idea of them goofing off like that is just I don't know, it just kinda lightens my heart a little bit because we take it so seriously, these things here as humans, and everything seems so, um, I don't know, I would say injury and illness, that's heavy, and to hear that perspective that they were just kinda goofing off about it on the other side, that's really kind of I don't know, it just it makes my heart a little bit light, thinking like that. Yeah. I'm wondering too about people making changes in their life once they come back. So you see that quite a bit. Isn't that true?
Yeah, there's a statistic that 70% of people get divorced because it changes them so much. And there may be somebody who was atheist, very money driven, trying to get this great career together and earn a lot of money. And they come back from a near death experience and they're like, I'm not interested in money anymore. It's this, the spiritual side of life. And, the wife or their husband might be saying, well, no, actually, I like the money. I want you to have a great career. And that can cause a couple to split up because the changes that people have that's the rest of their life. And skeptics are saying it's just a hallucination, but hallucinations don't change you like that. And people have other changes where they might suddenly become more psychic and they can't wear watches because the watches won't work, and they have these incredible synchronicities showing up and sometimes mediumistic talents. There's one of the cases in my book like that where he he went to see a psychiatrist afterwards and explained what happened to him, and the psychiatrist said it was just hallucinations. And then the person says, your grandmother's here, and your grandmother died, and he tells the psychiatrist all these things, and the psychiatrist throws him out of the office, but then rings him a little while later and says, I'm sorry about that. Obviously something's happened here, and I don't think you need a psychiatrist. You need to go into this from a spiritual point of view.
Incredible. You mentioned life review. And do you, so first of all, let's talk a little bit about that. You know, I'm thinking probably most of our audience understands the concept of life review, but could you explain that for us?
Yeah, there's a few of them in the book, and it's interesting that they experience it in different ways, but it's the same experience. It's a kind of funny thing to say that for somebody, it's like they're standing in a holographic globe and their life is going on, all these scenes all around them. Somebody else said they look into this big box and it's all in there. And somebody says that they're like they're sitting at a table and there's a hologram on the table, but it's very emotional. And they say they see every single second of their life up to that point. They see everything they've done and they feel everything they felt, and they don't just feel what they've uh, experienced in their life, they experience everything from the people that interacted with them. So if they were mean to someone, they'd feel how it feels when that was being done, when somebody's being mean to them. They feel how bad they feel. And it gives them this sense of empathy and thinking, oh God, I was so terrible at that time. And they also see that being mean to this one person has a ripple effect, and then that person goes on to be bad tempered and maybe mean with someone. I think this is one of the main things that can change somebody in a near death experience, because you see your whole life like that, not just one incident, everything you've done, but you also see the ripple effect of being nice to people. And they say things that really stand out to them are just the little things they completely forgotten, or just one nice little thing they'd done and how it made that person feel so good on that day. And so that's something that shows up. So it is that thing of the emotion of it. How does that person feel when you've done that to them, whether it's good or not? And there's this thing where it can be a really effective thing, I think, that in a way people have the near-death experience they need. Some people don't have a life review, and it's almost as though the spirit guides or whoever is controlling the near-death experience might say, well, we know this person, we know what they're like, this person will need a life review, we'll do that. And other spirit guides might look at someone and go, well, they're okay, we won't give them the life review, they don't need that much of a shock. And it can be such a hard thing to go through, and it's almost like I think to myself, oh man, I'm not looking forward to my life review.
You know, what came to my mind is the issue of time, you know? You're explaining a life review and feeling every moment, of all the interactions and the ripple effects and things like that. And if a person has a near death experience and they're like 50 years old or something, that's a lot of life. And if they're only gone for 9 minutes or something like that, isn't that incredible to think about all that they're experiencing? And so it must be obviously outside of Earth time, right?
Yeah, they talk about there is no time in the afterlife, and almost like they say it's very hard to describe, and also that they can tell you this thing happened, then this thing happened, then this thing happened, and then at the end they'll say, "I told you the events happened in that order," but they didn't really. It's like they all happened at the same time, but it's just the way we have to describe things on Earth because we only know about time being linear and one thing after the other. And so going through the life review, they can say it's over in an instant, but at the same time, they live that whole 50, 60 years of life within it. And it's also a thing of they may be dead for 45 seconds and they'll come back and say, my near death experience lasted 3 years or something like that, because there's no comparison. And people in the afterlife are almost like, oh, you're going to have a life on Earth? And they go and make a cup of coffee, they come back, oh, you're back from your life on Earth. You're only gone 80 years. And that person's lived that whole life. And there's also the thing with reincarnation is if time doesn't exist, then you're not reincarnated one life after another. You're experiencing all of your incarnations in the same moment. So your soul is taking on all that information. And that may be why with past life regressions can be so healing, because you can tap into that past life and to have something healed in this life. And it may even go back and heal something in a past life as well. And so, yeah, that idea of time, it doesn't exist. And you can't really compare it to life on Earth and living on Earth.
Yeah, it reminds me of the TARDIS on the old Doctor Who show, it's the little phone box, but inside it's immense, it just doesn't kind of line up. Um, oh my goodness. And so for people who come back and they make a big shift, like their priorities change and things like that, what do you think about, we've talked about consciousness and things like that. Do you think that it's possible, or would you even want it to be possible to maybe meditate and be able to access that through just a practice that we can do instead of having to have the trauma of a near death experience? Do you think that's where we're heading, or no?
No, I don't think so. I think near death experience seems to be such a massive change in perception that meditation wouldn't take you there. They say you can see in all directions at the same time, total 360 degrees, and it's not at all overwhelming. And your
Mm,
hearing is exceptional, and you see colors that don't exist on Earth. I don't think you can get there with meditation. There's people who've had ayahuasca
mhm.
and these sorts of things and said that there's nothing like their near death experience, even though ayahuasca can be quite an experience.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting because it sounds like it can be such a transformation for people, and maybe even a reset. Like, I've talked to other people who've had near-death experiences, and it helped them, from their perspective, get on a better path, and I don't mean better, in the terms of judgment, but I mean more in alignment with why they came, into life right now, that they had seen themselves kind of not following that, and then after the near-death experience, they changed their life, and they were more in resonance with their purpose here and why they were coming, and so, anyway, that just got me thinking because a lot of us are searching for, "Why am I here?" and that kinda thing, and, um, but we don't all want near-death experiences, for enlightenment. I don't think, um yeah, it just I don't know, it makes me think about different things like that. I wanna get your take on commonalities. You said that in the different stories, it's, like, beyond religion and things like that, and so what's can you put into context for us, what are the common themes, and are some of them religious? Do some people, report that it is a more religious experience?
Yeah, occasionally people report encountering Jesus, and I talked to somebody who encountered Hindu gods, and you also find there's one that's not in my book, Howard Storm. He told me he was an aggressive atheist. He was so against it, and in his experience, which was quite distressing, he met Jesus, and now he's a pastor, and that was a big change for him. And yeah, there is that kind of religious thing. I've heard that children's near-death experiences are much less likely to say something religious happened. There's one case in my book of Crystal Merslock, who said she was with Jesus. She was 7 when her NDE happened. But I think there's a thing where you get what you need or what you might expect. And on the other side of it, that doesn't seem to work. It gets so confusing because Howard Storm was an atheist and he met Jesus, and then you'll have someone who's a really strong Christian. They won't meet Jesus or anything like that, and they'll come back and say, um, I was a strong Catholic, but I'm not anymore. I've seen where the errors in Catholicism is, and that doesn't fit with my experience. So now I'd say I'm spiritual and not religious. I talked to somebody like that just the other day for the podcast. So to me, it's not a religious experience. They describe places that you might say is heaven, these incredible landscapes, but then other people have distressing experiences or neutral experiences. And I talked to a guy. He works in IT support in a corporate building, and in his near death experience, that was his near death experience. And I said to him, "So, did you work 9 to 5? Did you have a home? Did you watch TV?" He goes, "No, it was just day after day, hour after hour of going around this building fixing IT problems."
Oh
And
my goodness.
then he went on to this place he called the Bar and Grill, where he was there for days and days. And like his near death experience was only a few hours, but his experience in the spiritual world. And it's weird how this was tailored just for him, this experience to get his life changed to what it should be, perhaps. But he ended up sitting on the side of a river with 2 guys, and they're fishing and having some beers, and they're having a good time. And he's sitting there, and he suddenly thought, "Hang on a second, these 2 friends of mine are dead," because he didn't realize I was in a near-death experience. And I asked him, what about this non-stop IT work? He goes, "At the time, it didn't seem weird."
Oh my goodness. So I don't even know what to say about that, Simon, because it's so much like his life. You don't run across that very often, do you?
No, no, it was weird. And I think there was a point where he was sitting in this bar and grill, and there were lots of children running in and out and bothering him. And he couldn't work out what it was. And they kept saying all these weird things. And when he came out of this near death experience, he found out that there was a point where lots of people came in the room and prayed for him. And that's what he linked with the children. It was like people on Earth trying to contact him and sort of nudge him out of what was happening, because I think he was in a coma. And so they were praying for him, and that manifested as children annoying him in the bar and grill.
Oh, that's interesting because it kind of reminds me of a dream, you know, kind of like a dream that we might have, and where, the alarm clock is going off and it's something else in your dream, but it's having a similar sort of effect. That's really fascinating. So no life review there, right? I mean, very different. And then can you talk a little bit about the beings that people encounter? Are there commonalities or is it everything across the board? Um, what have you concluded or noticed?
There's a lot of people who meet with deceased loved ones, and there's people who will meet with what you might say are spirit guides, and they tend to be just very friendly people, and they get the impression that they've known them not just for their whole lives, but much longer than that. And one woman says, I got the impression that this is who I sat down and worked out my life plan with before I was born. And they seem to be very helpful. The deceased loved ones are so pleased to see you. There was one woman who was in this incredible landscape, this field, and it's so green, and there were all these people on the side in period costume, and some modern day clothes, some looked like future clothes, and even some that didn't look human. And she realized that these were all her past and future lives, that her soul was in each of them. And then there's descriptions of these beings of light, which can be described as 10 or 12 feet tall. And the light of them is so bright that if you were to look at them with your eyes, in human eyes, it would hurt. But they say that it just doesn't hurt your eyes. And they might have flickers of color amongst the light, and they may be in the form of a human, but you just see them as a light being. And it's almost like they're really advanced spirit guides, and they'll be there when you're having your life review. And but it's like there's no judgment, even though they might see this life review and these terrible things happen. The only person judging you is yourself, and they'll be there to support you. And some of them say they get this feeling these beings are, it's like you're a small child and these are parents and they're looking down, and it's like if a small child does something that's not very good, you're not going to really judge them and condemn them and be really mean. You say, well, they're a small kid, things happen. So they drew on the wall with a pen a little picture of a dinosaur. It's not like, that you're really going to have this terrible judgment on them, condemn them to hell or something. And there was a guy, no, there's a woman who saw a man walking up this kind of gravelly, horrible hill in her near-death experience, and she got this telepathic message to say, "Follow me." And the way he was dressed was quite raggedy, and she was following him, thinking, "This can't be Jesus. Jesus doesn't look like this." And then they got to the top of the hill, and they looked over, and it's this amazing countryside landscape, and that's where he was taking her to. And so, yeah, there's all sorts of different beings, and in the distressing near-death experiences, they can be quite mean, and in the hellish ones, there can be demons. But it's to me, it's a kind of a stage. It's the theatre of the near-death experience. You're being given something that is the perfect thing for you to help you make the right change in your life. And so it's not that hell actually exists, even somebody might experience it. It's that's what they need. And there was a woman I talked to. She was so nice, such a wonderful woman, a real sort of who she would be a great mum and such a nice person. And she had this experience where she was in hell for 2 years with all these demons and the fire and everything. And you think, what on earth? Why would she have that experience? Such a nice lady. But it's almost like where you have your near-death experience isn't the afterlife, it's somewhere else, maybe halfway to the afterlife. And
Hmm.
yeah, it seems to be controlled just for you, or it might be you that's controlling it, and it's all picked out of your subconscious somehow, or your higher self, or your soul, or something.
I do really like the fact it's unique to each person. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And the mystery of it. I mean, that has got to have kept you going all these years, with all the conversations and the research that you've done over the years, right? I mean, the mystery? I mean, I don't know. I mean, are you still as fascinated today as you were all those years ago with these topics?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's like I've been doing past life regressions for years now, taking people through them, and that's still fascinating. And things come up during regressions that I haven't seen before. And sometimes, very rarely, I'll be talking to the person and we'll be in this space with their spirit guide, and suddenly their voice will change and become a lot stronger. And they start talking about themselves in the third person. And it's the spirit guide talking through them, it's not themselves speaking. That's that happened a few times. And so the first time that happened, it was a bit of a shock. And you think, well, I wonder what's going on here, because when people are hypnotized, they get so relaxed and they just kind of mumble, and suddenly the voice is really strong and powerful, and what they're saying is different and weird. So it's always amazing what comes up. I've even done the regressions where people have gone to past lives on other planets, and
Oh,
so
yes.
you
Yes.
just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I because there are so many other things, right, that we could even talk about, but yeah, seeing other beings in near-death experiences, but I think what I am wanting to ask you most in this moment is how do near-death experiences, relate to a past life regression, or do they?
Yeah, I find that people who've had a near-death experience have a very powerful past life regression. It's as though for them, because of their experience, the veil is thinner, and so they can make that strong connection to the past lives. And I've had a couple of people who've come to me and said that I had a heart attack and I was resuscitated. Nothing happened, no near death experience. Can we go back and regress to that point and see if anything comes up? And I've done that a couple of times and stuff has come up. And it hasn't been like a full on near death experience, but glimpses of something. So something definitely did happen while they were being resuscitated. And I think if you did several sessions with them, you get more and more into it and you get more and more to find out what it is. But it's a thing where sometimes people have these experiences in hypnosis and they need to process it. And that might take months to think about it and really understand the feelings, and there are memories that are coming back.
Yeah, and maybe, when I asked earlier about meditating or something and accessing some of that for our own, growth, maybe past life regression offers some of that, right? Because having a past life regression can be very enlightening for people and healing for people, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, when I take somebody through, I do two different stages. As the first one is looking at the past lives, and then the second part is going into the space between lives where we would hope to encounter the spirit guide. And we can ask them all sorts of questions about their past lives and about their current life. And also, it can be so powerful to see these past lives, and you see lives that are so unexpected and unpredictable, but when you look at them afterwards, they make perfect sense and how they relate to the current life. So yeah, the past life regressions can be really healing and insightful. And the thing about it is, you're experiencing it. You might be able to go to a psychic or a medium and get a past life reading, but then you're just sitting there and they're giving you the information. But when you're hypnotized, all of this stuff's coming to you in your mind's eye, and you're getting the emotions and the knowledge, and you have all of these visuals that you can sort of think back on. And I can still see in my mind's eye what happened in the past life regression in 1987. I can still see those locations and those people and what happened there. So it can be quite a powerful connection.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you brought that up about you're experiencing it. You have the memory, because I think that that is really important. We're not just hearing it from another person. So, yeah, that's a really great point that you're making there. And so, Simon, we're about out of time already.
Oh.
I know, right? We didn't even talk about aliens or anything else like that. Um, wow. And I know you've got amazing stories in that realm too. But yes, so your podcast, please tell our audience your podcasts again and how they can reach out to you. And they may even want to explore past life regression with you. So, how can they best contact you and also buy your book?
Okay, so my website is pastliveshypnosis.co.uk, and on there, you can go to a booking page and book a consultation with me, which is free of charge, and we can sit for 20 minutes and talk about what you would want to achieve in a past life regression, whether it's something that's therapeutic or maybe you just want to explore and see what comes up. And my podcast is our Paranormal Afterlife, and the other one is called the Alien UFO Podcast. So what I do is an hour-long interview with the person that's on the podcast, and then later in the week I'll put out an episode where I read a 10-minute extract from their book. So this is how come I've reached 800 episodes. You combine all those numbers together. And I find that the extract episodes, the 10 minutes, they can get just as many downloads as the full interview episode. And so finally, the book is Verified Near-Death Experiences, and that's on paperback, Kindle, audiobook, and you can get it on Amazon, and you can also get it in Barnes and Noble and other places. I don't think they'd have it on the shelf, but you can order it from their website or go in the shop and ask them to get it in for you.
Yeah, that's really helpful because we like to get our books from all different places. So that's wonderful. Simon, I can't really say thank you enough. I mean, so many, so many topics. It's like a whole web of questions and concepts and things to really reflect on. So thank you so much for being here. We'll also put a link to your previous episode, Beyond the Reiki Gateway. 2 years ago, we'll put a link also in the show notes back to that. And that one, I think we talked more about past lives. And that I remember that was very, very enlightening when you were on before. Thanks again for being here.
It's been great. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Me too. Thanks. Hi, it's Andrea. If you've ever felt a nudge to learn Reiki with me, this might be our moment. I'm coming over to the UK this June and I'll be teaching a Reiki 1 and 2 class, and then a Reiki master class will be at the beautiful French Partridge Hotel near Northampton. I'm also including for my students a special exclusive event, and we'll share some time together outside of class, and I think that you'll like it very much. I also know that the world feels uncertain right now, and it may be easy to hesitate and put this sort of thing off. But this is exactly when we need to invest in ourselves and take action, because how we grow now will shape how we'll support ourselves and others later. This is no time to sit on the sideline. Spots are limited, and both the classes are now at least halfway full. Go to mainstreamreiki.com to reserve your seat, to learn more about both classes and that exclusive bonus event. I truly hope to see you in June. Thank you for listening, and you can check the show notes or visit the website beyondthereikigateway.com to find out more about the podcast and connect with me. Please keep in mind that views and opinions expressed in the show don't necessarily reflect those of the podcast or anyone affiliated with its production or advertising. This program is presented for your entertainment only, and all information provided is to be utilized at the listener's own discretion. I, along with the BTRG team, hope you enjoy the show as much as we enjoy making it for you. Wishing you highest blessings until we meet again beyond the Reiki Gateway.